Welcome to African Icons. Today we'll be discussing Chris Hani, the unsung hero of the anti-apartheid struggle. Chris Hani was born on 28 June 1942 in the Transkei, now modern-day Eastern Cape of South Africa. His father, Gilbert Hani, was a migrant worker. He had to leave home to work in the mines and farms in other parts of South Africa, which is common among men in the Transkei. His mother, Mary Hani, was a domestic worker, raising Chris and his siblings while also working in households when necessary. She played a pivotal role in instilling discipline in him. Chris Hani attended a local Catholic primary school near Fimvaba, where his father entrusted him to Catholic missionaries. Hani later attended Lovedale Institution in Alice, Eastern Cape for his secondary education. Lovedale was a renowned mission school distinguished for producing many African leaders. It was here that he became politically aware, influenced by the harsh realities of the apartheid system. It is also important to note that in 1953, the apartheid state enacted a piece of legislation known as the Bantu Education Act of 1953, which established the segregation of black and white schools and institutionalized inferior education for black South Africans to enforce white supremacy and ensure a cheap labor force, becoming one of the foundations of apartheid oppression. Hani subsequently enrolled at Fort Hare University, which boasts of an impressive alumni comprising of figures such as Nelson Mandela, Oliver Tambo, and Robert Mugabe. He studied Latin and modern classics at the university and graduated with a Bachelor of Arts in Classics in 1961. During his time at Fort Hare, he became actively involved in student politics and joined the African National Congress Youth League, also known as the ANCYL. After Fort Hare, Hani briefly registered for law studies at Rhodes University in Grahamstown, now known as Makanda. However, his evolving political involvement with the ANC and later the South African Communist Party disrupted his legal studies and resulted in him dropping out of the course. After withdrawing from his course, Hani went into exile and joined the armed wing of the ANC, which is known as Umkhonto weSizwe, which translates to Spear of the Nation. Before going into exile, Hani spent a brief period in Johannesburg where he worked at a law firm as an article clerk. The firm he worked for provided legal services to Africans facing apartheid laws such as the notorious Paslow Act. While working there, Hani had a first-hand experience of how the apartheid legal system oppressed ordinary people, which emboldened his revolutionary zeal. Johannesburg was also where he became more deeply involved in the ANC underground activities. He began to distribute outlawed literature, attend covert meetings, and consolidated his affiliation with the South African Communist Party, which was outlawed after the Suppression of Communism Act in 1950. By 1962 to 63, the risks in Johannesburg were becoming very perilous. Hani, now formerly a member of the ANC's armed wing Umkhonto weSizwe, was selected to depart the country to undergo military training abroad. This marked the end of his life in South Africa as a civilian and the start of nearly 3 decades in exile, where he developed into one of the ANC's most competent and astute military leaders. Hani's first stop in exile was Lesotho, and from there he moved into Botswana, Zambia, and Tanzania, where the ANC and MK had bases. Hani was then selected for advanced military training in the Soviet Union, where he studied guerrilla warfare, sabotage, and Marxist-Leninist theory. Soviet training placed an emphasis on both discipline and political education, which crafted him into a soldier and an ideologue. Hani then returned to Africa to serve as a political commissar and trained at ANC camps in Tanzania in Morogoro and Zambia in Lusaka. While training young soldiers, he also indoctrinated them in the political vision behind the armed struggle. By the mid-1960s, MK began getting frustrated at the lack of direct armed action inside South Africa. The ANC and ZIPRA, which was the armed wing of the Zimbabwe African People's Union, led by Dr. Joshua Nkomo, struck a deal whereby MK combatants would pass through Rhodesia, now modern-day Zimbabwe, to advance into South Africa, and in return, they would assist ZIPRA in its armed struggle. The crossing point chosen was a Wankie Game Reserve, today Hwange National Park, near the border with Botswana. In August 1967, a combined force of about 80 ZIPRA and MK guerrillas crossed from Zambia into Rhodesia through Wankie. Chris Hani was one of the political commissars of the detachment. The aim of the operation was to establish a guerrilla route towards South Africa similar to the Ho Chi Minh Trail in the Vietnam War. The guerrillas were almost immediately detected by the Rhodesian army and police. Several battles followed inside the Wankie Game Reserve. Despite being outnumbered and poorly supplied, the fighters held their ground for days. Many were killed, others, including MK combatants, were captured and sent to South Africa. Chris Hani displayed remarkable bravery and discipline during the operation and kept the morale of the troops high. His leadership during the campaign further cemented his reputation within MK as a fearless and reliable commander. In 1969, 2 years after the Wankie campaign, Hani authored a letter known as the Hani Memorandum to the leadership of the ANC regarding the corruption, elitism, and poor discipline that had started to emerge within the organization's leadership. The letter nearly got him expelled, but it compelled the ANC to reform its structures and take younger militants more seriously. During the 1970s, Hani was based in Zambia, where the ANC and MK based Hani coordinated MK infiltration operations into South Africa. He also established training links in Czechoslovakia and other Eastern Bloc countries. His reputation as a disciplined and incorruptible leader grew, which made him one of the most trusted commanders in MK. By the 1980s, Hani had ascended to the rank of Chief of Staff Umkhonto Wesizwe. He was pivotal in expanding MK's operations during the township uprisings post the Soweto uprising in 1976. He worked tirelessly from Lesotho, Zambia, and Angola, and Mozambique. Maintaining MK's fighting capacity despite the South African Defence Force's cross-border raids. In 1990, apartheid in South Africa was drawing towards its conclusion, and figures like Nelson Mandela were released from prison. The ANC, PAC, and the SACP were unbanned by the apartheid regime, and the draconian legislation which governed the country were already being repealed. Chris Hani subsequently returned to South Africa from exile after 27 years. He became General Secretary of the South African Communist Party after Joe Stover had stepped down following a terminal illness. Negotiations between the ANC and National Party for Democratic South Africa had begun. However, the political atmosphere was extremely tense as political violence erupted between the ANC and Nkandla supporters, and right-wing white extremists were determined to subvert the transition. Chris Hani, as General Secretary of the South African Communist Party and a senior ANC leader, was one of the most popular figures in the liberation struggle, admired by the youth, the working class, and feared by the apartheid establishment. On the morning of 10th April 1993, Chris Hani was shot dead outside his home in Dawn Park, Boksburg, in Johannesburg. He had returned from buying newspapers when a gunman confronted him in his driveway. The assassin, Janusz Walus, was a Polish immigrant and far-right sympathizer of the Conservative Party in South Africa. The killing was orchestrated with the involvement of Clive W. Lewis, a senior Conservative Party politician who provided the weapon. The goal was to assassinate a beloved liberation leader and provoke mass violence that would derail the negotiations, possibly sparking a racial civil war. Hani was seen as a radical voice. His removal was intended to weaken the ANC and sow chaos. South Africa was thrown into shock and outrage. Riots and protests broke out, and the country stood on the brink of mass unrest. Nelson Mandela made a historic televised address calling for calm and unity by stating, "Tonight I'm reaching out to every single South African, black and white, from the very depths of my being. A white man full of prejudice and hate came to our country and committed a deed so foul that our whole nation now teeters on the brink of disaster. We must not permit ourselves to be provoked by those who seek to deny us the very freedom for which Chris Hani gave his life." Mandela's words were credited with preventing the country from spiraling into civil war. Chris Hani's death accelerated the negotiation process. His assassination convinced many that there could be no delay in establishing democracy. Just 1 year later, in 1994, South Africa held its first democratic elections, won by the ANC under Nelson Mandela. Hani is remembered as a martyr of the liberation struggle, symbolizing both the cost and freedom and the resilience of the movement. Thank you for watching. This was African Icons. I hope you enjoyed the video, and please like and subscribe.